and welcome very much to Conversations, where it's my pleasure this evening to welcome to the program Air Marshal Ayez Kham. He's a retired Air Marshal from Pakistan and Kashmir. He's a prominent journalist now in Kashmir and in Pakistan, and he's here accompanying the Prime Minister of Azad, Jammu and Kashmir, early September of 1993. And Air Marshal, welcome very, very much to Conversation.
Thank you very much.
I wonder if you might, you're here particularly, and I've had conversations with you about the situation in Kashmir. You have, and we are going to show the audience some videotape footage of what it is that is transpiring, or some of the atrocities, I think is not an overworked term, that is being done there. But I wonder if maybe you could share with us your own perception of the long-term situation for the people that lived in the occupied Kashmir, and then perhaps talk about this particular expression of resistance that has been shown since about 1989, 1990. Fill us in, the American people, a little, if you could, on the incredible situation that has been the case of Kashmir since 47, 49, concentrating on the contemporary situation.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Well, first, may I tell you something about the recent history, the background of the Kashmir dispute. The British left Indian subcontinent. Finally, they departed in August 1947, leaving two dominions, that is India and Pakistan. The basis of division of the subcontinent were basically religious and economic. Religious in the sense that the Muslim majority areas were supposed to be part of Pakistan, while the Hindu-dominated majority areas were supposed to become part of India. Now, Pakistan consists overwhelmingly of regions which opted for Pakistan on the basis of principle of partition. This principle was not allowed to be made applicable to Kashmir. The people of Kashmir, who number about 12 million now, at the time of partition were about half that number, about 6 million. They wanted this to exercise the option to vote or to be allowed to exercise their will through plebiscite, as was soon resolved by the United Nations. The way the situation developed was that on 27th of October 1947, India, on the pretext, and this was unfortunately false pretext, that the ruler of Kashmir, who was a Hindu and who had fled his capital city of Srinagar and was on his way to Jammu, had signed an instrument or letter of accession to India. Now, this illegitimate reasoning or basis for accession was rejected by the majority of the people of Kashmir, who said that they should have been allowed to exercise their will as promised to them by Lord Mountbatten, the last British Viceroy of India, and also by Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, who in his speeches before rushing his troops and after his troops had occupied the valley of Kashmir, and in fact about 63% area of Kashmir, repeatedly on 14 occasions on the floor of the Indian Parliament, on the All India Radio Network, and in his letters to the British Prime Minister and to the Pakistani Prime Minister, gave a solemn commitment that the government of India will allow the people of Kashmir to vote so as to determine their wish for accession to Pakistan or to India.
And this has never been allowed in the case of Kashmir?
This has never been allowed.
Even though there were UN resolutions?
Now what happened was that soon after, in fact little before the Indian Army was rushed into Kashmir, a communal violence started in the Hindu majority province of Jammu, or the Hindu majority state of Jammu, and about 250,000 Muslims were slaughtered. It was at that point, in fact, many of my own cousins and relations were slaughtered in that Holocaust, and 250,000 is a big number.
It certainly is.
Well, At that point in time, Sardar Muhammad Qayyum Khan, who is the Prime Minister of Kashmir, he was a young man of about 26 years of age. He became leader of a resistance movement and in fact fired the first shot against Indian aggression and against Hindu fundamentalist violence against the minority population in Jammu. Now, with Sardar Qayyum were volunteers from the state itself, and some of us who, because we live across the border, both sides of the Pakistan-Kashmir border, is about 1.5 million Kashmiris who reside there. Well, when the resistance started against brutalization and violence, India rushed its troops on that pretext, which is in fact was a pretext to occupy the state because there was a vacuum, there was a military vacuum, there was a political vacuum. The British had left and they were pulling out, so India took the opportunity and occupied Kashmir. So this is this illegitimate aggression that we have been protesting for the last 50 years.
Then there came to be a line on the ground, in a sense a ceasefire.
So what happened was that there was the first Indo-Pakistan war lasted till 1st of January 1949, in which volunteers who are, one can say, Kashmiri nationals outside the state and some volunteers did participate, and they managed to free about 32,000 square miles of territory, which today forms the state of Free Kashmir or Azad Kashmir. Well, in between this period, that is from 49 till date,
yes,
till January of 90, when military protests started, when the people took up arms, the state of Jammu and Kashmir has been exploited politically, economically, demographically, culturally, ethnically, socially by India. Economically, in the sense that then Kashmir is a very beautiful area. It's a forested area full of forests and jungles. If you go to Kashmir now, you find that 60 to 70% timber of Kashmir has been stolen, mostly burned by 500,000 Indian troops, used as the fuel. Then India moved its Hindu middlemen in the handicraft trade or in the agriculture trade, in the tourist trade, and these middlemen sucked all the money and left nothing to the local population.
This is over the long haul.
This is over the
49 on. There was a long simmering occupation as an occupying force, and there was a simmering resentment by the people. But if I may,
exactly.
And there had been UN resolutions that there ought to be a plebiscite, as I understand, where all the people of the Kashmir could vote whether they want to accede to Pakistan or India, and that has not been allowed to happen.
Exactly. I must touch on this plebiscite issue. Now, when the resistance started, the Prime Minister of India took the government of India, to the United Nations. The United Nations, in its first resolution on Kashmir, dated 21st of April 1948, resolved that the future of Kashmir should be determined by a plebiscite based on an exercise of vote under UN auspices and not under the Indian rule of Indian government or under the puppet government set up by India and Kashmir. Again, on 13th August 1948, a more forceful resolution was passed by the UN Security Council, stressing on India to hold a plebiscite. The government of India agreed on both these two occasions, and the administrative process was set in motion with the American Admiral Nimitz, who was supposed to be Admiral Nimitz, to be the first plebiscite administrator. That means that the administrator, the plebiscite would have been held under supervision of UN and under the overall control of Admiral Nimitz.
And this plebiscite has never been allowed to be carried out?
No. They on one pretext or the other. So between 48 and 57, as many as 11 or 12 resolutions were passed by the UN, and the government of India time and again assured the UN, United Nations Security Council, that they will hold a plebiscite under UN, but kept on evading this repeatedly for 10 years.
On one pretext or another.
On one pretext or another.
And in the meanwhile, the resentment is simmering among the people, which are overwhelmingly, the people of Kashmir, again to underscore, are overwhelmingly Muslim.
That was a period of transition.
Yes.
The people believed that Jawaharlal Nehru, who was a respected Indian leader,
Yes.
and a friend of Mahatma Gandhi, that he will stand by his word. But in 1956 and 57, events took a turn for the worse for the people of Kashmir. What happened was that Pakistan signed a treaty of friendship and military cooperation with the United States of America. Now, India vehemently protested because India had already fallen into the lap of Moscow, and Jawaharlal Nehru had become a close ally of Stalin and Soviet leaders, and he went back on very strange excuse that henceforth, because Pakistan has befriended America, the United States, so India will not hold any plebiscite in Kashmir.
And this has gone on over a long 40-odd year period and so forth until about 1989, 1990. There was a generalized uprising.
No, I want to go the process of rigged elections, because this is what led to eventual armed struggle by the people of Kashmir. If you bear with me for 2 minutes.
We want to get to some of the film footage, yes, huh?
Okay. Now, when India went back on its word that it will not hold a plebiscite, it resorted to holding elections to legitimize its illegal hold on Kashmir. The way they went about this was that a constituent assembly, a legislative assembly, was formed to pass a law of accession to India. This happened sometime in 1957. The United Nations took very strong exception to this illegitimate defiance of the Security Council resolutions and rejected this resolution, stating that the government of India should openly and equivocally reject this law being passed by the State Assembly. The government of India once again assured the United Nations that this law will not be accepted by New Delhi, that's the government of India. Mm-hmm. Yet they kept on even after this, and in this election, in the formulation of this kind of puppet assembly, only 6% Kashmiri population voted. Thenceforth, 11 elections were held till the election of 1987 and 89, in which only 2% Kashmiris participated.
They had a general strike, more or less.
General
on their
strike.
hand. Right,
in fact, they boycotted these elections.
And there was this general, in a certain sense, among the general population, there was a general sense of oppression and a sense of
oppression. And uprising was because by that time 1 million Kashmiri youth were out of jobs, jobless. The state economy has collapsed. There was flagrant corruption and pocketing of money by corrupt rulers, puppets of India.
And the UN Accords have never been...
And the UN resolutions had been violated and defied. Now so the inevitable had to happen.
Yes, right. The pressure would come on, and it came forth there. And the reaction by the Indian forces has been horrendous.
Initially, during the year 1989, these were by and large peaceful protests against corruption, against economic exploitation and political exploitation. Now, India decided to solve the problem militarily rather than solve the problem politically. India decided to solve the problem by rushing troops. From 100,000 troops, they brought in about 500,000 troops. And the process of militarization of the state started in January 18th, 1990, when Jagmohan, known as the Snake, and a killer by instinct, was installed as governor. He took over his charge on 19th. On 20th, he ordered a massacre of Kashmiri protesters. Massacre. A deliberate order to shoot and kill. And
as official policy.
As official policy. Because the very next day, a crowd of 400,000 were fired upon and 400 people were killed.
Good Lord.
And the resistance started from that day.
And you now have as much as 500,000 troops?
Over time, yes, during the last 4 years. From about 4 divisions, the strength has come up to about 12 regular Indian Army divisions. There's 200,000 troops, regular troops. and 300,000 paramilitary forces.
Oh Lord, and they're wreaking havoc and what could be seen as state-sponsored terrorist campaign against the people of Kashmir.
Exactly.
You have film footage. Could you describe some of this and perhaps set it up that sets the horrendous conditions that the film footage is able to depict, and maybe spell out some in a quantitative sense, spell out what some of the dimensions are? There's been some tens of thousands killed. The violations of human rights are horrendous. Maybe you could spell some of that out and set up some of this film footage that you brought in that we can show the audience.
Well, during the last 2-3 years, I have collected some film footage, as you're saying. Now this concerns, these are actual shots of in the process of violence and intense brutalization of children, kids, women over the last 4 years now.
Mm-hmm.
The films have been taken, these are films are obtained from various sources from time to time. The first film pertains to the period of 1990, and as you'll see this film, it comes right up to 1993.
Mm-hmm.
Now these films relate to protest demonstrations by college students, by parents, by traders, by business community against violence.
Mm-hmm.
Then you'll see shots of buildings being razed to the ground, houses and properties burning, people being beaten up, people being beaten with bayonets, shot at and killed. You'll see shots of women being brutalized, women who've been gang raped. They trying to express their torture. You'll see something horrendous, something totally inhuman. What India has been doing is what they call siege and search operations. Now, or cordon and search operations. This relates to Indian troops, a battalion strength, 1,000 to 4,000 troops attacking a locality at middle of the night or any time of the day, forcing people, men to be herded into the open, and the troops go in and rape women. They beat up and rape women in front of their kids, and sometimes they bring the women naked in the streets and shoot them.
The situations are different, but the activities are similar to what we have been lamenting, which has been going on in Bosnia. The situation is different politically.
Yeah, exactly.
But the horrendous human rights violations are similar.
Actually, even in Bosnia, that kind of inhumanity is rare. I mean, one does see like the Bosnian soldiers emerging from tunnels. Exactly, I would agree. But you see, comparison sometimes can be misleading. Bosnia is a great tragedy. It's a human tragedy.
Certainly, also is Kashmir.
And so is Kashmir.
And Kashmir is very ill understood.
And unfortunately, while Bosnia has got world attention, and President Clinton and the U.S. administration has taken very serious note of self-depredations against Bosnians. But in Kashmir, India has cocooned this territory, this population of 8 million people. They have been locked behind a wall of bullets and bayonets.
And they've also, it'd be interesting to note, had a curfew, and they do not, curfews imposed on the people, and they do not let the international journalistic community travel there.
What if somebody does sneak in?
But so some of these films and so forth are very difficult films to have obtained because the conditions, there's an occupying force that is in opposition to journalists being able to document what is going on there. The journalistic community should pursue that question of their access to show this as they have in Bosnia.
Exactly. What has happened is that, in fact, human rights organizations like Amnesty International, Asia Watch is based in Washington, and Friendship House and others, they have been approaching the government of India to be allowed to get into Kashmir. Similarly, journalists of main American newspapers have tried to go there, but they've been refused. But yet, some brave Americans have gone in, and they have taken photographs.
And some others.
And what you're going to see is some of these shots have been taken by American photographers.
Very good. We're going to try and show them a couple. Why don't we then in the studio set up the tape, if you would please, and we'll run this, and then we'll come back. And again, we're speaking with Air Marshal Khan from Azad Jammu Kashmir. And if we'd set up that first film that he brought in, please, and run it now then, please. Thank you.
This is an edited version of news reports from Indian and international news agencies in the Indian-held Kashmir. Nothing has been added to the coverages by CNN, BBC, Eyewitness, Newstrack, Observer, and ZTV. This is the whole truth. Kashmir is a land of beautiful valleys, highest mountain peaks, and lush green forests. It is located in the heart of Asia, surrounded by Pakistan, Afghanistan, China, and India. Since 1947, when India and Pakistan emerged as two independent nations, 2/3 of the area of Kashmir has been under forced Indian occupation. According to the United Nations resolutions, Kashmir is a disputed territory whose people have to exercise their rights through a free and fair plebiscite under United Nations. The people of Kashmir have always stood for their freedom against Indian occupation. While India is accused of gross violations of human rights, its own claim is that people trained across the border in Pakistan are responsible for the insurgency. Covering the Kashmir situation is not easy. Independent journalists and human rights observers are banned by India from visiting the state freely. But reports from India and international news agencies, which are allowed in occasionally, present a picture totally contradicting official Indian claims. The people in Kashmir call themselves the freedom fighters. India calls them the militants.
In Srinagar town, danger stalks at night. Cordon and search begins at 3 a.m.
This was a raid on a militants' hideout in the heavily populated Nishat area of Srinagar. A BSF contingent took positions around the house, sealed all the escape routes, and then knocked at the door. Behind the scenes stood the informer, covered from head to foot, unrecognizable. From among all the men pulled out, the informer pointed out the militant, Bashir Ahmed Rathar. Rathar denied being in possession of a Kalashnikov. In such situations, the security forces often get trapped and suffer casualties in firing by the militants.
ये जहाँ से फायर आ रहा है जहाँ होशियारी रखी है उसी इलाके में जहाँ से फायर आ रहा है उसको जहाँ होशियारी मेरे साथ रही है इज इट क्लियर टू यू रिपोर्ट ओवर
These shots, fired at 4 a.m., killed an on-duty Jawan. After the cordon is laid, the search begins at 7 a.m. The men are assembled on the Maidan. Women stay in their houses, whilst the dwellings are searched for weapons. Previously captured militants called cats identify the men.
The aim is to identify the militants, pick them up, and subsequently we interrogate them, and they give the leads of the activities of militants over here.
At this cordon and search operation, people were made to sit in the open for 14 hours, including after dark, without food or water. As tensions rose, there were some regrettable incidents, which even if they're infrequent, give a bad name. Despite the dark and the fact that we'd accompanied the BSF, we still obtained footage of soldiers hitting civilians with lathis.
हम आजादी चाहते हैं। मैंने क्या किया सर? मैंने नहीं कुछ किया। मैं बच्चे से मैंने आजादी चाहते हैं। मैंने कुछ नहीं बोला। क्या बोला?
क्या कोड नेम आपका?
मोमिन खान।
आप मिलिटेंट हैं?
हाँ जी।
क्या मकसद?
मकसद हमारा है जहाद।
किस लिए?
इस्लामी इनकलाब।
किसके खिलाफ?
इंडियन गवर्नमेंट के खिलाफ।
इसमें जाहिर है कि आपकी जान को खतरा है।
हाँ जी, खतरा है।
हथियार है आपके पास?
हमारे पास हथियार है।
हथियार चलाने की
ट्रेनिंग भी है हमारे पास।
आप हथियार चलाने को तैयार हैं?
हाँ जी, तैयार है।
जान लेने को तैयार है?
जान देने को तैयार हो, लेने को भी।
किसकी जान?
हम लेंगे दुश्मन की जान।
दुश्मन कौन?
दुश्मन है हमारी इंडियन आर्मी।
What ground realities have driven the people, especially the youth, to this point?
हम फिर आप खड़ा है गया, हम चाहते हैं वो वादा पूरा करो, यहाँ फ्रीडम करा दो। जो 1947 में हमसे वादा किया है पंडित नेहरू ने, यहाँ पे फ्रीडम करा दो, बैठ गया पानी का दूध पानी का पानी अलग हो जाएगा। क्या हम क्या चाहते हैं? खुद वो जब वोट डालेंगे खुद पता चलेगा। ना हमको पाकिस्तान चाहिए ना हमको हिंदुस्तान, हमको खुद बख्तियार चाहिए। वी वांट फ्रीडम।
Winding down the streets of Srinagar, no one can sense that the underside of the city is simmering with hurt and anger. The fury of the militant youths stems from their belief that the Congress National Conference Combined came to power by rigging the polls. Beyond these hills lies Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, when the Jammu and Kashmir elections threw up a crop of frustrated youths who saw in the alleged rigging the destruction of their last hopes of plebiscite, a popular Kashmiri dream. Unlike the unsuccessful 1965 infiltration, when Pakistan had sent across its own guerrillas to create disorder, this time youths were enrolled from the valley itself. The first clue to the plot came in August last year with bomb explosions at the Srinagar Club and the Central Telegraph Office, followed first by a foiled attempt on the life of DIG Watali, and then by large-scale violence, anti-India demonstrations, burning of the tricolour, and deaths in armed clashes with the police in April and May this year. Apart from those who have become terrorists, there are many youths who are ready to take the plunge, like executed terrorist Maqbul Bhatt's youngest brother.
कलाशनिकोव हम अपने कश्मीर के दुश्मन पर चलाएंगे।
कौन दुश्मन?
दुश्मन तो वो आगे मसला है, वो खुद पता चलेगा उसी वक्त दुश्मन कौन।
आपके सामने कौन दुश्मन है?
दुश्मन इंडिया दुश्मन है हमारे सामने।
हिंदुस्तानियों के ऊपर गोली चलाएंगे?
क्या है जिसने हम पर जुल्म ठेसा है?
तो हिंदुस्तानियों पे आप गोली चलाएंगे?
हाँ।
कितने ऐसे लोग हैं जो कि लड़ने के लिए तैयार हैं?
सब बच्चा कश्मीर का बच्चा रेडी है।
आप लड़ने के लिए तैयार हैं?
बिल्कुल।
आप बंदूक उठाने के लिए तैयार?
बिल्कुल।
आपने उठाई है बंदूक?
अभी नहीं, चाहता हूँ, तड़प रहे हैं यहाँ के जवान।
Shoaib, a rabid communalist from Maqbul Bhatt's village in Kupwara, wants what he claims is his right of plebiscite.
If it will not decided on the political basis, then it will be decided with Kalashnikovs. It will be the final program of the Kashmiri youth.
So are you ready to take Kalashnikov in your hands?
Yeah, if same thing will continue, we are ready. And we are not only ready, we will definitely do it.
We have so far arrested 84 such young men who have been trained from the cross.
So those camps are still going on, arms are being given to them, training is being given to them, money is being sent through them. I want to ask you, am I wrong when I say that Pakistan is doing this thing?
The stated official Indian view remains that the militants are backed by Pakistan, but the militants themselves deny it.
इस वक्त तो कोई हमें मदद नहीं कर रहा है।
जैसे पाकिस्तान में ट्रेनिंग कैंप्स चल रहे हैं?
पाकिस्तान में ट्रेनिंग कैंप्स नहीं चल रहे हैं।
नहीं चल तो रहे हैं,
नहीं चल रहे हैं.
चल रहे हैं.
ये तो इंडिया वाले कहते हैं. The reports that we are getting now, but they haven't come across so far. They are being trained.
But they will come across.
Well, that is the feeling.
That is the plan.
They are being trained for that purpose.
So when they come across, what will you do?
We have not, because of the borders, borders have been taken care of.
And the chief of police himself admits that the sealing of the border with Pakistan has not changed the nature of the resistance. Is it not because the resistance is totally indigenous?
The militants have the advantage of an invisible network of sympathizers who are providing them support for waging an underground struggle.
यूथ को गाइड करने के है इस वक्त शबीर अहमद शाह है, फारूक रहमानी है, आजम इनकलाबी है, फिकल अहमद बख्शी है.
Shabir Shah, leader of the People's League, is the prime hero of the militants, despite the fact that he has been declared a proclaimed offender with a reward of 25,000 rupees on him. The police has not been able to arrest him so far.
The court released Shabir Shah. We are unable to find Shabir Shah to this date. Court released him. At the same time, court released another man from Riyasi jail, also accomplice of Shabir Shah. We can't find him too. I made up my mind that anyone who has anything that sticks on him, if the judicial board also releases him on one side, I will arrest him and put him into the jail from the other side.
Shabir Shah's hometown Anantnag, which witnessed organized communal riots in 1986, has been nicknamed Islamabad. The name has caught on so well that a letter written to an address in Islamabad would be delivered by the Indian Postal Department. Shabir Shah's brother, an opposition MLA from Anantnag, and his mother are proud of the fact that Shabir is fighting for the secession of Kashmir. Shabir's father was arrested by the police in April this year. The old man, seen by the public as innocent, died in police custody. That trigger of widespread violence.
We don't have any instrument to find whether A is a terrorist. We get some information. We get hold of a man. He gives 4 names. Maybe 2 of them are not correct. He is involving innocent people. That possibility is always there.
इंट्रागेशन में मेरे साथ बहुत ही जुल्म किया है. कुपवारा में और श्रीनगर में. क्या जुल्म? जुल्म ये किया कि एक तो ज़हनी तो दूसरे तो जिस्मानी भी जुल्म किया है. क्या क्या? जिस्मानी ये तो मारपीट करते हैं और ज़हनी ये कि नींद से बेदार रखते हैं रातों को 5-6 दिन. और बहुत सारे जुल्म अब घर वालों को मैंने नहीं बताया है क्योंकि उनको कुछ बुरा ही लग जाएगा, इसलिए मैंने उनको नहीं बताया. इसलिए हम चाहते हैं कि ये अलग होना चाहिए.
Hostility towards the center has grown in the valley. Once again, the secessionist sentiment has been whipped up, and it has started showing more and more at the grassroots level.
आप क्या चाहते हैं? हिंदुस्तान के साथ रहना चाहते हैं कि आजाद?
आजाद.
पाकिस्तान के साथ कि अलग?
पाकिस्तान के साथ.
हिंदुस्तान से अलग बस. और पाकिस्तान के साथ जाना चाहते हैं?
नहीं, फिर हमारी मर्जी, हम किससे मिलेंगे किससे नहीं मिलेंगे, लेकिन कश्मीर आजाद होना चाहिए बस.
वो तो अलग मुल्क है हिंदुस्तान, हम तो कश्मीर तो अलग है.
Pakistan.
आप?
Pakistan.
क्यों?
Back again now with the Air Marshal, and the films are horrendous. I mean, it is something that ought to stir the conscience of all the people that are viewing this. I wonder, there was hints at it, there was some again, but I wonder maybe good to underscore. We're talking about a situation where there have been tens of thousands of human beings killed in this venture. Do you have some, could you underscore that and maybe compare it to the situation, the numbers that have died and the brutalization that has occurred in Bosnia? But you're talking 35,000 people.
35 to 40,000 killed. Actually, the total casualties from January of 1990 till date are about 155,000. Now this includes 35 to 40,000 killed. The figures are difficult to collect, exact figures, but these are somewhat exact figures which have been verified by different human rights organizations, including the Parliamentary Committee of the British Cabinet, and by Asia Watch based here, and by human rights groups in India itself. I have published a book titled The Rape of Kashmiri Women, This will, yeah. So, but anyway, with stories and figures, coming to figures, 35 to 40,000 killed, 50,000 physically and mentally tortured and maimed, left as people who are no more humans. These are victims of torture cells. Then about 60,000 who have over this period of 3.5, 4 years disappeared in subhuman Indian jails during the process of torture.
There have even been some journalists that have been ill-treated?
Journalists have been beaten, journalists and doctors have been killed. They've been attacking hospitals, they've been going into surgeries, Indian soldiers. They've been raping nurses. They've been killing surgeons. The only heart surgeon in Kashmir, a cardiac surgeon, Dr. Guru, and a very fine person who has met certain Americans who visited in the Sora hospital. He was assassinated and killed. Dr. Ashai, the only neurosurgeon, was killed. So they played havoc. Medicines have been stopped. There are no medicines. There's no electric power in Kashmir. In winter months when the temperature is -20, there's no electricity there. So it is a horrible situation altogether. In this film that you have seen, the most horrendous scene you must have felt is of people heard it in the open, and a masked man just pointing his finger and targeting on to a certain person that he is a militant.
Yeah.
And you must have seen people's
images. With no trial, with no
trial, and you have seen, my dear American viewers, you've seen yourself the man being hit on the head immediately. So,
and you yourself have documented the rape of women.
I documented the rape
in this book that you have.
I have translated a book by a Kashmiri author from Srinagar. The book is titled The Rape of Kashmiri Women. This is a story of about 70 to 80 women who were gang raped in front of their kids in the open, or sometimes thrown in pits next to the bunkers and pulled out for rape and thrown back in cold nights. And eventually when the girls started dying, they didn't wish to waste even a bullet. They just hit her on the head and throw her out into the river.
We hate to, in a certain sense, see these things, but we do have some footage that relates to some of these issues, and we wanted to...
Well, I have... these people are shown... These are horrible scenes, and it's better not to see them, but I hesitated talking about this. But this is what has happened, and the world needs to know. The American people need to know. You are human people. You are humane. When we talk about democracy and we hear about democracy and respect for human rights, all that we can do is to have tears in our eyes that maybe one day America comes to our help.
Well, we have more film. We want to let the people know. The Americans have to be awakened to this situation. Exactly. They certainly ought to, in the name of international conscience, and in our own interest, we should understand these things and try and help lead towards some sort of a new world, just world order.
Well, what is required just now is that...
No, but I'm just wondering if we could, if we could... Let's show them some more of this film that you brought in, and the film, in a certain sense, will speak for itself, I'm afraid. But if we could, in the studio, set up that second piece of film that we prepared, and again, I remind you, we're talking with Air Marshal Khan of Jammu Kashmir. Jammu Kashmir. Set up the second roll, and we'll run that, and then we'll come back and close out the program. Please roll the tape now, then, please. Thank you.
Amidst a lot of new factors that are threatening to radically change the scene in Kashmir is a new underground militant organization, Hizb-e-Islami. They are claiming to be mujahids or crusaders of Islam, having links with the Hizb-e-Islami of Afghanistan.
In these circumstances, it wasn't surprising to find proof that many former Afghan mujahideen are now fighting with the militants in Kashmir. We came across Majid, a former engineer from Sudan, who once fought in Hikmatyar's Hizb-e-Islami group. He said he had come across from Muzaffarabad and had fought with the Hizbul Mujahideen for 2 months.
Most of Arabic, they would like to come to Kashmir, but you know the cross-border line is very tight. But they are about near 6,000 Mujahid Arabic. They are there and they would to prepare and to arrangement to come here in Kashmir.
My son his family tradition of believing that he must go and help the people in Kashmir. He unfortunately was not in Kashmir, he was going there, and there was an accident. Our only goal was, and the only major goal in life was, the freedom of Kashmir.
There are still about 3,500 armed and trained militants in the valley, and according to Indian intelligence, yet another 4,000 across the border, waiting to cross. There are over 100 militant organizations operating in the valley. The pro-Pakistan Hizbul Mujahideen has overtaken the pro-independence Kashmir Liberation Front in firepower.
हिज़्बुल मुजाहिदीन भी यही कहती है कि उसी को इम्प्लीमेंट कीजिए, लोगों से पूछा जाए वो इंडिया चाहते हैं या पाकिस्तान। और दूसरा उनका यही चीज़ है कि वो अब सपोर्ट तो नेचुरली वो पाकिस्तान को करेंगे, कश्मीरी तो वो पाकिस्तान के हक में ही देंगे।
Because of our successes against the pro-independence militant organizations, at the moment, the pro-Pakistan and militant organizations which advocate secession of the state to Pakistan, they have gained a sort of ascendancy in the militant movement.
जी ऐसी कोई बात नहीं, ये तो सरासर प्रोपेगेंडा है हमारे खिलाफ कि जो कि लोग कमज़ोर हो रही है, ये दूसरी तंजीमों का शायद मैं कहूँगा उनकी बेकली है।
So all the goodies are diverted to the pro-Pak groups, but hoping to turn around popular sentiment towards itself, Pakistan's emphasis is on converting the reluctant through offers they cannot refuse. The biggest convert was the Students' Liberation Front, earlier aligned with the JKLF, now entrenched in the pro-Pak camp, which calls itself Ikhwanul Muslimin and was responsible for the kidnapping of IOC director Durai Swami.
वहाँ जो कल पाकिस्तान है वहाँ की 400 है, हम ये कहेंगे कि वो 4 उंगलियां हैं और कश्मीर उनका अंगूठा है। ये जब मिल जाएगा तो मौका बन सकता है, पावरफुल हो सकता है, तो एक उंगली अलग कैसे रह सकती है।
All militants say the final choice will be left to the people.
हम अपनी राय को लोगों पर थोपना नहीं चाहते हैं।
मिलिटेंट जितने भी होंगे, 30,000 होंगे, 40,000 होंगे या 1 लाख होंगे, वो ये हक नहीं रखते कि वो 1 करोड़ 20 लाख का फैसला कर सकें। ये तो लोग हैं जो अपना फैसला खुद कर सकते हैं।
आपके घर में भी कोई मिलिटेंट हुआ?
हाँ, ये मेरा बेटा है।
आपके यहाँ कोई मिलिटेंट हुआ?
हाँ, मेरा भाई है मिलिटेंट।
पकड़ा गया?
नहीं, वो पकड़ा नहीं गया है।
कहाँ है वो?
मालूम नहीं कहाँ होता है, वो तो ऐसे मालूम नहीं, वो जंगलों में बढ़ता होगा और कहाँ।
When the militants destroyed a couple of 100 post offices, banks and other government buildings, people supported the cause.
There are people who have been trained, there are people who are militants, and there are people who feel that they will like to make Kashmir independent and finally accede to Pakistan. That is what they have been thinking for years.
Now, no soft solutions could possibly work. A chilling new dimension is the sudden assertion of women fundamentalists belonging to Dukhtarane Millat. A new crop of politicians is emerging. People who speak the language of the militants. जो काम इस वक्त militants कर रहे हैं, आपको लगता है कि militants सही कर रहे हैं?
हाँ, बिल्कुल सही कर रहे हैं। देखिए, जो भी इनकलाब दुनिया में आता है, कश्मीर की बात नहीं, अफगानिस्तान की बात करेंगे। तकरीबन वहाँ 18 लाख लोग मुसलमान या वहाँ लड़ने वाले जो हैं शहीद हो चुके हैं, और कितने जलावतन है, कितने जख्मी हैं। तो उन्हें ये नहीं सोचा कि खून खराबा होगा उससे क्या हो.
The militants are making efforts to form a legitimate front, a political party which they could support from behind the scenes. They are banking on the support of a large section of the Muslim community.
There is bad news for the militants. The impression in the valley is that the government's security strategy known as Operation Tiger is in fact a disguise to catch and kill militants. 162 have been killed or arrested in the past 6 months. These include Dr. Turabi of Hizbul Mujahideen, Altaf Qureshi of Ikhwanul Muslimin, Hamid Sheikh of JKLF, and Mushtaq Ahmad Lone, also of the JKLF. Each funeral becomes a rallying point for friends and relatives.
This Shaheed Mazar at the Eidgah is one of many so-called martyrs' graveyards in Srinagar, where militants and civilians who have died in firing by security forces are buried. This is the grave of Marshal Ayez Kham, the chief of the Jamiatul Mujahideen, who was shot dead on the 13th of March.
The police claim he died in an encounter along with his financial advisor, Abdul Hamid Khan. But this is what Khan's daughter told us.
जब हम वापस पहुंचे पापा आ गए अंदर तो उन्होंने वो जिप्सी तो आई थी तो उन्होंने पापा को पकड़ा निकाला जिप्सी ने फिर हमारे आपके नासी इस्लाम को उतारा उसको भी भरा जिप्सी ने तो फिर हम इधर आए उन्होंने बोला हमको कि आप जब ये हम उनको शहीद खाने में ले जाएंगे तो आप वहीं पहुंचाओ.
However, when Nahid got to the police station, this is what her father looked like. He'd apparently been shot through the mouth. Nasrul Islam's skull had been blown apart. In fact, as one BSF officer told us, the 13th of March cost the militants dearly. 3 top militants of Harkatul Mujahideen were also killed, again allegedly after being picked up by security forces. This is where they are said to have been interrogated, and this is the widow of one of them.
पौने 12 बजे मेरे हस्बैंड को उठा लिया और इसको इंट्रोगेशन शुरू किया बराबर पूरे 4 बजे तक इस साथ डैडी उसको निकाल दी और जोर से मारा फिर उसने आर्मी बीएसएफ वाले ने मुझे कहा खुश हो गई बीवी को देखो अपने खामद का और इसको ऐसा ऐसा टक टक बराबर 30-50 से ज्यादा फायर किए उन्होंने वहाँ.
And on the same day, this man, Muhammad Ramzan Sofi, said to be a divisional commander of Ikhwanul Muslimin, was allegedly shot dead in an encounter. In the eyes of local Kashmiris, all these deaths are custodial murders, and the clean gunshot wounds seem to suggest that
it would not be unreasonable to assume that they could have been executed.
Arson and atrocities perpetrated by the security forces have actually succeeded in bringing the various militant organizations closer together. Today, the alienation of the Kashmiris from India is total.
I will support the Mujahideen. I will tell them in any possible way I can.
These graves are witness to the fact that whether it is a question of secession or unity, under oppression and the might of the gun, it is humanity that is sacrificed.
यहाँ पर जो हम यहाँ कमरे इस वक्त बना रहे हैं ये इसलिए है कि हम कोई भी कुर्बानी देने के लिए तैयार हैं आज़ादी हासिल करने के लिए. यहाँ पर हम एडवांस में रखते हैं तैयार ताकि जो कोई शहीद होता है उसको यहाँ पर कोई दिक्कत ना हो दफनाने के वक्त.
Doordarshan on the 15th of September reported that 4 Hizbul Mujahideen militants were killed in an encounter.
जम्मू कश्मीर में 4 उग्रवादी सुरक्षा बलों के साथ मुठभेड़ में मरे 32 गिरफ्तार.
The local people had a different story. They claimed the men had been taken alive and their deaths occurred later in custody.
How many people saw them being arrested that evening?
Well, they were arrested in a crackdown. It's there before everyone. And you can verify it from the people of that locality.
Only this morning, a young militant was shot dead by the army on the outskirts of the town. The whole of Sopor has turned out for his funeral, and there's no doubting the anger of these ordinary Kashmiris.
Although the dead man was an armed militant, it wasn't just his wife mourning him. The irony is that every time a Kashmiri is killed by the security forces, more militants are created. Promises of judicial inquiries and better discipline in future will do little to convince the Muslims of Kashmir that they can expect justice from the security forces or from their masters in Delhi.
We know very well that there are few people who have been very badly killed. Were innocent people.
आपको लगता है कि आपका लड़का छूट जाएगा?
हाँ, उनको पता है, उनको बेकसूर
लगता है कि छूट जाएगा कि बंद रहेगा?
ये छूट जाएगा।
छूट जाएगा। भरोसा है आपको?
हाँ, मैं बहुत परेशान हूँ। मैं बहुत परेशान हूँ। मैं कोई सहारा नहीं है, कोई सहारा नहीं है।
कोशिश कर रहे हो डैडी को छुड़ाने के लिए?
नहीं, वो बेगुनाह है, खुद छूट जाएगा।
भरोसा है?
हाँ।
कब तक छूट जाएंगे?
पता क्या, वो छूट जाएंगे, बेगुनाह है ना, वो छूट जाएंगे।
You tell me why from this militant has come. He has definitely come from the people. So he is representing the people. They are from the people. They are living with the people. So they are people. You don't differentiate between the militant and the common man.
So not surprisingly, when eyewitness filmed the funeral of the militants, the atmosphere was charged with anger and bitterness. Thousands shouting anti-India slogans took to the streets.
अब सुबह हम सुनता है कि वो पतंग खेलता था, कुछ गड़बड़ हुआ है तो मिलिट्री ने गोली लगाई, वो तो उसी को आया।
इस बार में मुझे ने क्या किया था, ये 5 जमाने पड़ते
रोज होता है दिन में ये, कभी बच्चा मर जाता है, कभी कोई औरत मर जाती है, कभी जवान लड़की मर जाती है, कभी बूढ़ा मर जाता है।
ये ब्लॉक था, उन्होंने पोलैंड में जुल्म किया, चेकोस्लोवाकिया में जुल्म किया, एक वक्त आ गया तो वो सुपर पावर ही टूट गया। अगर हिंदुस्तान आज हमारी बात नहीं सुनेगा तो मैं ये यकीन के साथ कह सकता हूँ हिंदुस्तान का भी वही हासिल होगा।
This is the funeral of a militant. But who are these people walking by his dead body? They don't have guns in their hands. They don't have their faces covered either. In a land where each and every child is crying for a future, where women of the Parda observing Muslim creed are out in the streets, screaming against Indian occupation, where every young man is openly fighting for freedom, this movement cannot be called militancy. It is every man's cry for freedom, nothing more, nothing less. And this is the whole truth.
It's a horror. It's hard to comprehend that this is going on. We only have a few minutes left, I'm afraid, here at the end of the hour. Happy to have been able to share these. It's a word that I use advisedly. It's not a happy scene that you depict, but it's one that the world and the United States ought to be aware of, and we ought to call attention to. We are not aware of that. Nearly in the American society is not nearly as aware of that as they ought to be.
I entirely agree with you. The people of Kashmir have not been able to reach out to the American people. We have serious limitations. First, that we are behind bars. In effect, we are in a prison house, locked there by 500,000 army. Today, in the valley of Kashmir, there is one Indian soldier with a machine gun for every 3 civilians who have been beaten and battered. We just hope that the United States of America, which is signatory to the United Nations resolutions, realizes its responsibility to the people of the world. we are the only people who are at the present time victims of brute colonial rule, a foreign colonial Indian rule. Now the solution is already there. There are United Nations resolutions in place which call for plebiscite. But the situation has deteriorated to an extent that the very first step required is to end violence. Violence must stop. Indian military must stop shooting the people of Kashmir, innocent people, especially women and children. Now this should be followed by dialogue, peaceful dialogue. We ask for a peaceful solution. We, the people of Kashmir, are not militants or terrorists. We are peaceful people. We are peace-loving people. We have produced writers, philosophers, partisans. When you wear our shawls or our pashmina sweaters, they're famous the world over. If you come to our land, you see how much love and affection will shower on you. Whenever an American goes there, the people feel overwhelmed, they go rushing with flowers. It's absolutely propaganda, absolutely wrong propaganda, that the people of Kashmir, the youth of Kashmir will threaten an American or a European. We know that if we can reach out to you, you will come to our help. We need your help at this hour. We want you to pressure India to stop killing us. Please help us. Thank you very much.
Well, I can understand that plea. It's not a plea not only to be made in the name of the Kashmiri people, but also it would seem to be in the name of the American people themselves. Would do well to help them, their government, begin to take note of this situation. It is one of, if perhaps not the most volatile area. There are 1 billion people involved in the subcontinent. There are deep-running animosities. There is an obvious injustice that exists there, and it's a situation that is perhaps the major flashpoint of potential danger if we do not find some sort of a pathway toward a just settlement of the conditions that exist there. Sorry that you have had to be on this unhappy journey of sharing the horror of what has been going on. Let's hope that it may have awakened in the minds and hearts of a number of the viewers the need for us here to take attention to this very difficult, unjust situation that exists there and bring some pressure upon our decision-making process to move in the right direction.
With your permission, I wish to add a few words. What has encouraged us, people like me who write and who read papers and like New York Times or Washington Post and New York Post, etc., that American journalists have written very forceful write-ups, articles, in which they have criticized and condemned Indian atrocities. Again, in the US Congress, there are congressmen, members of the House, who are men of conscience, who have passed bills. Letters have been written by the Human Rights Caucus of the Congress to Secretary Baker earlier on, and bills have been moved. Amendments have been moved by people like Congressman David Obey and Dan Burton. We hope that Clinton administration encourages the lawmakers to follow up on what they have been doing earlier on.